Good afternoon. Frank Sinatra once sang in one of his most acclaimed pieces, quote, "Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York." These words obviously demonstrated the high attitudes and pride many Americans felt in the past towards the largest city in the Union, New York City. It was a city that spurred the ingenuity, that lifted skyscrapers, that fostered economic development, and became a melting pot of many different ethnic and cultural groups. As a matter of fact, according to a chart from New York City Historical Database Urban Amnibus, 2 million individuals or so flocked to the city during the time period between 1800 and 1910, evidently attracted to the spectacle that once was the prominent borough of Manhattan and the city in general. I am a young man who takes deep pride in my knowledge of the ongoings of American society in the past. And as a former resident of the city for the first 14 years or so of my life, I take deep pride as well in familiarizing myself with how bustling the streets, rivers, and neighborhoods I walked through were in the past. Not many people understand how glorious the city of New York used to be. Evidently, a city not held in high regard by many individuals in contemporary times. And so, I decided to investigate and bring forth to you folks a comprehensive overview of the New York City of yesteryear. In the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, the city of New York was the place to be for individuals around the world seeking a better life. According to a piece by historian Frederick Wirtz for the website NewYorkFamilyHistory.org, in the post-Revolutionary War period, due to the opportunities presented by the construction of the Erie Canal, quote, immigrants made up a significant portion of the workforce. This should paint a robust picture of the sheer number of opportunities presented by New York City's economy in the past. Furthermore, from 1820 onwards until around 1920, there was a seeping wave of around 20 million or so immigrants who flocked to New York. According to an article by Lisa Rogue for the website Remedy, quote, they came from countries spanning the globe, ranging from Northern to Eastern Europe, and from Scandinavia to Syria. Evidently, many of these ethnic groups had to hop through burdening hoops, but gradually assimilated themselves and lifted themselves to economic and social prosperity, and thus contributed to the morphing of New York City to the greatest contemporary metropolis in the world. It was a metropolis defined by many profound accomplishments, especially within the economic and industrial sectors. In 1882, dream-catching trailblazers funded and mastered the construction of the awe-inspiring Brooklyn Bridge, a staple upon commerce and transportation in New York City. Even to this day, in the 1800s, New York Harbor was bustling and attracted commerce from around the world, including, according to the prominent state's historical maritime database, MaritimeHeritage.org, quote, China clippers, Caribbean schooners, and even Long Island steamboats, who all flocked to do business at New York Harbor in this golden era. Evidently, New York City is known for its famous skyscrapers known around the world. As a matter of fact, here are two of them, the Empire State Building and the never-forgotten World Trade Center. Well, they all spiraled to the sky during the 19th and 20th centuries. As a matter of fact, according to a chart by visualcapitalist.com, as each particular decade of the 1900s passed, the city of New York was able to add taller and more ingenious buildings to its majestic skyline, a symbolism of the heights possible to reach if you were lucky enough to reside in New York City during this wide-spanning golden era. Evidently, New York City also had to go through burdens that not only affected the urban area, but the individuals residing within it, as is common through every metropolis throughout human history. As a matter of fact, Jacob Riis's 1900 expose, How the Other Half Lives, describes apartments on the Upper East Side of the city defined by crowdedness, poor sanitation, and an array of European immigrants residing in sheer crowdedness, as displayed by this picture over here. How sad, how sad. In 1862, there was a race riot fueled by Irish resentment against the local African American population due to anger over the mandatory draft instituted by Lincoln during the Civil War. Evidently, crime was a staple upon these events. And as pertaining to crime, in the 1970s, 80s, and even into the early years of the 1990s, New York City experienced a crime wave, the likes of which it had not seen to its history to that point, defined by murders, gang violence, etc., as made evident by a chart put out by Courts.com with derived data from the National Archive of Criminal Data in New York City. A spike in the number of annual homicides lasting for 40 years and topping off in 1990 also correlated with the emergence of white flight, or in other words, individuals leaving the city in mass droves. This exodus of sorts is regarded by many as the end of New York's era of ingenuity and deep prosperity. New York City, a city that you and I have both probably had the pleasure of living in and or visiting, was once the pinnacle of American capitalism and ingenuity. Immigration, commerce, and architectural accomplishments all solidified New York City's firm standing block as the greatest contemporary metropolis in the world. It's riveting to think that the streets that we walk through were once so bustling, were once filled with commerce and ingenious individuals, and were once symbolized the peak of Western civilization, at least in the past. Thank you very much.